Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another riveting and exciting episode of Growing Up with Godzilla. My name is Donny Winter, and this is my show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've grown with the character and franchise over time. So, obviously, being that we're in season three, we're some new faces are occurring, some familiar faces are returning, and I am always just really excited to have back on the show one of my dear friends and favorite human beings, Matt Frank. Hello, my friend. Oh,
Oh,
what was that? Ooh.
I don't know what you're talking about, or something we might be talking about later, or
A
now, whatever.
beautiful Godzilla 70th anniversary comic anthology.
Ooh, there's multiple covers
Ooh.
because that's modern comics industry.
No, we are absolutely going to be talking about that a little bit later because it was a fun collaborative experience,
Yeah.
which I'm still very much nerding out about. But obviously, being that you're back on the show and it's warmly season three already, I'm gonna of course badger you with some fun questions to pique the interest of the viewer, naturally.
Mhm.
But how have you been? What have you been up to? What's been going on?
It's a lot of me drawing. It's a lot of me hunched over my desk. But but I've also been taking some time to, do stuff just for me and try to find a little more work-life balance, which I think is healthy. I know too many artists who work too much, too hard. Just been. I haven't done as many conventions this year. I've actually realized I've only done a small handful. And it's just because I'm trying to find a balance between how many conventions I do every year and like trying to find the ones that are, obviously you want to do the ones that are profitable and the ones that are have good attendance and have good numbers, but you also want to do the ones that are a lot of fun and
Yeah.
you get to see people that you love and that you don't get to see very often. So I haven't done very many this year yet, but as we get into the summer months, that number is going to start increasing. I think I have 3 in a row in July. God help me, but
Ooh,
G Fest being one of them.
woohoo! I'm excited. I'm actually going to be there this year, so I'll hopefully get to see you. So,
Oh
uh,
yes, it will be a lot of
that way
fun.
we can get a picture with our comic. It'd be great.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, that's right.
that's going to be fun. But no, I'm glad that you're really considering the work-life balance thing. I think what many people don't often realize as artists, writers, like obviously we kind of like fall prey to that capitalistic assembly line of like like productivity, produce, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes they can be a little creatively taxing. I know, like, last year for me was my most, aside from, like, the collaboration we did and a couple of other projects I was working on, I did diddly shit. Like, I barely did anything. And it was nice. It was kind of nice to just scale back a little bit because sometimes as creators, we need recharge time because that just gets us excited for whatever the next project is, right?
Exactly. I personally have been. I actually took a little mini vacation this past weekend, just something to get a little space, recharge my batteries, like you said. And now, like, it's so funny whenever I do that sort of stuff. Whenever I do take like these little vacations, these little sabbaticals, I get that itch kind of
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of it where it's like, okay, but now I want to create, now I want to do things. And I think it's good because I honestly I think a little earlier this year I was having a little bit of I had a little bit of creative burnout. I was
Mm.
just I don't know really what it was. I mean I probably could with enough time in therapy, I'm sure I could figure it out. It's but it's just, sometimes the juices aren't flowing and you don't feel that same drive. But
Mhm.
thankfully, as the year has gone on, stuff has gotten, I've managed to get a little bit. Stella's got a little bit of her groove back, and just the train's pulling out of the station, and any other metaphors I want to throw at you, um,
I love them.
but yeah, well, thank you. The so yeah, I totally agree. it was interesting because I was fully under the impression I was actually going to take a good chunk of this year to work on a very specific project, because I was like, well, there seems to be a bit of a break in contract work. I've got some stuff on the horizon, but nothing immediate. So maybe I can take a little space and kind of space things
Mm-hmm.
out. And that seems to have changed. There might be some more stuff on the horizon than I expected, and the horizon is coming up fast. So nothing I could necessarily go into a lot of detail about, but
Right.
it is there is some exciting stuff happening. And as somebody with ADHD, as somebody with a spicy brain,
Woo! Spicy
woo,
brains represent.
spicy brains. Sometimes that pressure is very creatively motivating, and it's like, oh, okay,
Mm.
now pressure's on, and it's time to get the engine going, and that pressure
Yeah.
can create some interesting creative solutions, and it also can mean that you just say screw it. I don't have to sit here and think so hard about this
Yep.
particular monster illustration doesn't need to blow people's socks off. I just need to be having fun with it. So
Sometimes that's the hardest obstacle to get through is like getting from point A where you're like, okay, this is work to do, to point
mhm.
B of like fun, woo, like enrichment, right? No, well, I definitely resonate with that because the beginning of the year was kind of one of those funks for me, but now I've like been, I don't know if it's springtime and that's kind of like getting me out of it, but I think I've been kind of regaining my composure on the creative front. So
Mm, that's good.
obviously Godzilla related stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
We've had so much Godzilla stuff to consume over the last year because it's been almost a year since you've been here. We've had Godzilla minus one. We've had Godzilla X Kong. There's been so much Godzilla stuff to consume. How have you been processing everything?
It's really interesting that you say that because just recently I was sharing some Godzilla related stuff on Twitter, as is my want. And I was sharing some stuff, and for the first time, I saw somebody say, I'm getting a little burned out on Godzilla stuff, but this looks cool. I'll check it out. And I heard that and I thought, okay, like I don't want to invalidate anybody's experiences, but that's very interesting because that's not a sentence I
Hmm,
ever thought I'd see written, at least not
right.
in English, because Godzilla burnout does happen. Like it definitely happened in the 2000s
Oh,
when,
2004.
yeah, when it was like, you do the math and it was like if you between like 89 and 2004, you're almost averaging a Godzilla movie per year, like, or a
Mm-hmm.
big kaiju movie, at least one per year, in Japan anyway. And so it totally makes sense that like you have this audience burnout of like the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, it's been on the back of my mind, because,
Hmm.
like, over the past I mean, since Shin Godzilla, we've had some pretty consistent Godzilla stuff,
Yep.
and I've just been like, we're not used to this much influx of Godzilla material, because we went through the desert decade of
Mm,
nothing other than, like, the Pipeworks games, basically.
yep.
So like how do we now get to a point where we're like, okay, these companies are realizing that Godzilla's very lucrative. Like how are we going to digest everything? I've been digesting it perfectly fine, but I have no doubt that there are people who are like, oh, this is a lot, you know?
I think that the current pop culture landscape is very interesting because the markets are so diversified now. Come to our Godzilla podcast. We're going to talk about marketing. Um,
As creators, we have to think about that type of thing.
it's true, and I think that it's very interesting to see the inherent nicheness of Godzilla kind of and the kaiju genre in general kind of butt up
Mm,
against the mainstreamification of a lot of pop culture properties, because
yeah.
you talk to like people in the mid 2000s and you were to tell certain people, hey, in a couple of years there's going to be like an Iron Man movie, and it's going to be huge, it's going to be a massive hit, and it's going to launch this giant cinematic universe that no one's going to be able to match. And then in like another 10 or 20 years or however friggin' long it's been, everyone's gonna be sick of it. Like, if you were to tell, like, comic book nerds from that era that, they would be like, "You're crazy. There's no way."
And if we were to, if us, as we are now, were to go back in time to little Donnie and Matt,
Mm.
sad and misunderstood on DeviantArt in like 2005,
Mm.
about how Godzilla would be flourishing, we would probably crap ourselves. We'd be like, that's not gonna happen. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Who are you, strange, a mysterious, handsome stranger? um, yeah,
We'd look at ourselves and be like, wow, you aged like fine wine. Okay.
you know, it's so funny. I do sometimes think about that about myself. Like, I'll be like, I kind of look at myself and be like, yeah, I'm almost 40. I guess I'm doing okay. And then but then I'll go to
Ugh.
Japan and I'll talk to my Japanese friends that are like older than me, but look half my age, or they look way younger. And I'm
Ugh.
like, and I'll tell them like how, oh, that's right, white people age like old fruit. And
We do. We
but I think
do.
we're doing you. Hey, present company's doing pretty good. So
We're great. We got
yeah,
this. We got this. If there's one decent genetic I have, and there aren't many, it is aging. It's
yeah.
definitely the aging. So, going back to Godzilla. So, obviously, we've seen Godzilla kind of emerge into like the more so into the pop cultural landscape. So, I like my first question for you would be what aspects of Godzilla, in your opinion, make the character the pop cultural icon that it is? Because I think everybody has like different things they focus on with regard to that.
It's a question that definitely people have kind of been wrestling with a little bit, because you look at characters, you look at other pop culture institutions, other characters like, you know, again, to bring it back to Marvel, stuff like Spider-Man, or
Mhm.
DC with Batman, or, you know, or Star Wars and stuff. And you have these stories that are very human, you know, they're very relatable. They're very they people lock onto them in for different reasons, but ultimately they are very human. And I ran into something recently where while Godzilla is a pop culture institution and it is like there is an immediate recognition to be had with that image.
Mhm.
Um I've noticed that there's a large swath of people where that image is all they know about Godzilla. And outside of that, the human story, the connective tissue is totally foreign to them. I was just on a podcast called Junk Food Cinema that's been going for 10 years, and it's a great podcast. They talk about, you know, weird bits of pop culture ephemera, some super popular, some very niche. And the host only just now got to Godzilla. And he by his own admission used to be a little dismissive of it and was a little
Mhm.
like, oh, it's just, and now he watched Godzilla 54 and he was like, oh my god, this is so good. This is like,
Wow.
where has this been my whole life? And I think that you have this thing that's the bedrock of it's part of the bedrock of our collective universal culture.
Mm.
And people, because of things like the internet and because of increased accessibility, people are like, oh, there's allegory here, there's
Mhm.
lore, there's a huge number of characters and a huge like stuff to really dig into. And I think that is the key to the current form Godzilla has taken, because
Yeah.
people are discovering like, oh, there's so much more to this than just that. Because I truly, there are people I've known that I've introduced Godzilla to who truly did think that literally all it was like an hour or so of people running and screaming from a monster in a suit, and it just
Oh,
being like,
yeah.
like literally, I used to do this YouTube series, this live stream YouTube series called Matt's Monster Movie Mondays.
I remember
And
that.
yeah, I'm hoping to come back to it at some point, but at the first episode we did was GMK, and
Mhm.
the hosts of the show, the other co-hosts of the show were basically like, Matt, we didn't know, like we didn't know that these things have like themes and characters and arcs. We thought it was just,
Mhm.
well, it's like there's almost like a mental block, and I think that now people are getting past that mental block.
I mean, I think we can acknowledge. I mean, if we look at the MonsterVerse right now, and then like the fact that we've had Shin Godzilla and now Godzilla minus one,
Mhm.
like the franchise has proven its versatility like so
Mhm.
much, and I think that for many people, like they don't always feel comfortable going beyond the entertainment to the actual discourse of like the multiple layers that we see from these characters and in these films, right? But when
Mhm.
somebody does take that step and they're like, okay, yeah, entertainment, but here is the discourse now, here is what we're witnessing, you can definitely see their eyes open and they're just like, wow, like there's way more to Godzilla than we actually realize. And I think Godzilla minus one and its resounding success
Mhm.
is right now the catalyst for projecting Godzilla further into the limelight. And
Mhm.
I like as much as I love the MonsterVerse, I think that it's doing something the MonsterVerse hasn't entirely done yet, which
Mhm.
is show that, historic side of Godzilla that I think is very educational. So,
That's a really interesting perspective, because the MonsterVerse, it's just so interesting that in the span of less than a year, we had two Godzilla movies, both of which highly produced and very, so to speak, like they're well put together movies, and they're completely the opposite ends of the spectrum, and I find that really fascinating,
mhm.
because it really shows you this, and it's so funny how like minus one, it's become I've likened it in my head a little bit to the way people used to talk about King Kong,
Mhm.
back in the 30s, between the 30s and the 50s, because it was not available. If it wasn't playing at the theater, you couldn't see it. And now minus one is this movie that like people are like, I heard about this Godzilla movie that won an Oscar, but it's not the one that's out now. So, and I can't see it. And of course,
Mhm.
it's become like the most pirated
I
film
saw
in the
that. I was like, "Oh
world.
no."
Well, it's like, well, because a lot of these international markets have not caught up to that. They're not,
Right.
the a lot of the companies involved are kind of like, well, no, we've got to put it out in Japan first, and then Japan, then we make our money on our Blu-ray sales, and then
Yeah.
America will get it. And it's like, guys, you
You
gotta
got to
keep
jump on
up.
it.
You gotta keep up. I mean, but that's, I get it. They have like, Toho is a really big company and there's a lot of layers there, and it's
Right, yeah.
hard to it's kind of like the thing that sorry to bring this up, but I think it's a really funny anecdote. It's the thing that I had heard that Obama told to Trump when Trump was
Oh,
taking office.
oh,
He's
and what was that?
Bear with me. And of course, it's just in one ear, out the other, because there's nothing between the ears when it comes to big
The
boy Trump jumping.
accuracy.
But
The accuracy.
he said, Obama said, America is a cruise ship, not a speedboat. Like, it
I
takes
love that.
time to turn. It takes time to like get it to go in the direction you want it to go in. and
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's the reality with a lot of big companies, because I'm getting into like some high level like socioeconomic stuff here, but I guess I'm just saying that
I love these deep sophisticated conversations. So,
the long of the short of it is that, hopefully this will be a lesson learned, and that moving forward, things will be a little snappier to come out,
right.
especially if there's like some kind of sequel to minus one, which is like, I'm very curious to see what's going to happen next, because
Mhm.
Yamazaki clearly wants to make a sequel, but Yamazaki's also getting a lot of offers from a lot of people that aren't in Japan, and
Yep.
that could also be really big for him. So, and probably pay better too.
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Personally, I'm loving, like, bringing it back around. I'm loving all of the Godzilla media. I'm loving that
Me
we have
too.
this smorgasbord, this variety of stuff. And I think it will taper off a little
Oh
at some
yeah, for
point,
sure.
but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, and I know there's been a lot of discourse from people being like, well, especially like very negative discourse about Godzilla X Kong, contrasting it with Godzilla Minus One, and I've just been like, we live in a world where we can enjoy both. I can go and sob at the metaphorical implications of Godzilla Minus One while simultaneously going to Godzilla X Kong and shouting at my queen and
Mhm.
making people look at me strangely. Like it's possible to enjoy both, right? Like they
Yeah.
have different levels, and that's something that we should accept, right? So
Mhm, mhm.
I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you, and then we will talk about the comic because I am nerding out. So I've been really intrigued by this question because somebody asked me this in an interview that I did some time back. But which Godzilla film is your comfort film and
Mm.
why?
That's a very interesting question because so I'm currently going through I'm trying to go through all the Godzilla movies with a friend of mine here in Austin who's never seen Godzilla movies, and they are like they're immediately locked in on it. They're just like, "Oh my god, I've pack bonded with this entire franchise." And so we're watching it, and I'm realizing like certain things. I'm realizing certain things as I'm watching each new movie, and we're not very far into it. We only just saw Mothra versus Godzilla, so
Mm,
we're still in early days. But a lot of the show off films I actually think fit that comfort food
mm,
um category because not just from the fact that I'm so familiar with them, because I am. I like so many of these movies I know scene for scene, line for line. But I would say the original is not in that category because the original for a long time was very stressful for me.
mm.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. I love seeing new people's reactions to the original. I love seeing like people who've never seen the original. I love seeing their reaction to it. Uh, but like there's something also like mechanical about the show off films, just in the mechanics of the films themselves, because they use a lot of the same sound effects over and
Yeah.
over again. And they use that in Shin Godzilla. You know, you have the same cannon fire sound effect, and you have like every explosion kind of sounds the same. The monsters use a lot of the same sound effects over and over again, and there's almost like this rhythm it gets into you where you kind of like you're kind of just leaning back and you're kind of like, I feel like I could take a nap. Like it's
It does lull you, doesn't it?
yeah, like it's like and
Little did y'all know that they actually hired Matt to do the sound effects for the films. Somehow
yeah,
you went back in time,
mhm,
and
mhm.
that is what happened.
Mailed it to myself in the past when I wasn't born. It's the it's just this idea of like there's something so and maybe it is part of the my neurospiciness, just this repetitive sense of comfort, that like I
Mm,
know not only do I know what's gonna happen, I know what it even sounds like. I know and I know every scene at this point because these are the movies that I used to grab on VHS when I was a kid. And
yeah.
the Heisei movies are also in a similar category, but there's I think because the Showa movies are so much like inherently cuddlier, because
Yeah.
even in the more serious ones, the very the handful of serious ones they made, there's still like this there's still this warm fuzziness to it because it's not super intense. It's not super scary. I I have another friend that I've been watching horror movies with and trying to kind of inoculate myself because I've never been a horror movie guy,
Mm,
and I'm balled up in a pretzel the whole time because I'm just like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And they're just
yeah.
like, man, you wiener. No, no, they're not mean about it, but it's just this but
Well,
some people find horror movies relaxing, you know?
yeah. My fiance is one of those. Like he will
Mm.
put on The Descent. Like I don't know if you ever watched The Descent, and
Yeah.
just like sit there with a glass of wine, relaxing. And I'm just like, this is stressful. Like, what do you, for anybody who find like Godzilla versus Destroya, heaven forbid anybody find that to be their comfort film because I will literally tell
Mhm.
them I have a therapist on call and I have a great referral. Like, if just
Uh,
saying,
yeah. No, that's a I mean, Destroyer, there's certain parts of the Heisei movies that I do find relaxing, again because I've seen them so many times. Destroyer is one of the harder ones to kind of get into a groove on because you know
Yeah.
what's coming. But yeah, it's so funny you bring up The Descent. This is a bit of a sidebar tangent. I literally went caving this last weekend, and
Oh.
we kept talking about The Descent, and I'm just like, stop talking about The Descent. Um, but for some reason, monster movies aren't as stressful to me as like, like slasher films and stuff. Like that
Yeah.
stuff really icks me out. But monster movies, it's more just like, well, the monster's just doing kind of what comes naturally, and so there's less of a sense of cruelty to it.
Right.
And anyway, but I'm trying to think of like specific examples of which ones I find comforting. I mean, the original Mothra versus Godzilla is probably a big one. As
Which is a
far as,
good selection.
yeah, it's just as far as comfort food goes. There's another one. Oh, like um Sea Monster. Sea Monster is a
Oh,
big comfort
that's one
food
of
one
mine too.
because it was the first one I had on VHS, and I know and it had the AIP dub, so you have these this great writing and voice acting go with the action. It has one of my favorite dub lines in a Godzilla movie, which is it's Takarada's character. Like the other characters who want to break into the red bamboo base and save everyone, and Takarada grabs the dude by the arm and is like, I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, but I've never stuck my head into a hornet's nest. And I love that
What?
line.
I forgot about that line. It's such a great line. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Hmm.
It's interesting. Like for me, I mean, my comfort films tend to shift, but I will say that my go-tos for comfort films, like for the Showa era, would be Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. That's definitely my
Hmm.
comfort film. But
Hmm.
Ebera Horror of the Deep is pretty close to being tied with that. For the Heisei era, Mothra or Godzilla vs. Mothra 92, strictly because of the music. I love the music.
Hmm.
Relaxes me very much. Now, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is an interesting one. It's a comfort film because I can leave the TV during a battle and then come back and the battle's still happening.
I have another anecdote. Sorry, not to. I hope I'm
No,
not
please
interrupting
share
you.
it.
Uh, I was at a Christmas party at some extended family at the house of extended family, and I think that was when El Rey Network was doing their Christmas Godzilla marathon. So I just threw it on because nothing was on the television in the living room. And then an older relative came in and saw it and was like, "Oh, is this Godzilla?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." It's like I think it was.
You were waiting for that opening. You were like,
Yes, it is. I actually think it was Space Godzilla. And then he left for a little while, and then he came back and he was like, "Are they still fighting?" It's just so funny.
it's literally like it's funny that you mentioned like that and then talking about like you were waiting for that opening.
Mhm,
Somebody, bless this person's soul, at work at the end of the
mhm.
semester, like a couple of weeks ago, asked me, they were like, Donnie, I see you post a lot about Godzilla. Like, talk to me about Godzilla. An hour later, and I'm like, I am so sorry. And they were like, actually, I never even realized this about Godzilla. I think I'm gonna go watch. And I'm like,
Oh.
I don't need to go door to door anymore. It's
Do
great.
you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior Godzilla?
Yeah, like, and I don't have pamphlets. I just have what's in my brain. So there you go.
Yeah.
So here is the other question that I really want to like pick at people's brains about. Like, which Godzilla film would you argue is the most underrated?
That's another good one because my go-to for underrated is usually Godzilla's Revenge. Is All Monsters
Mm,
Attack because it's one of the hardest sells. It's the one that for years people have described it with like this withering, like, oh yeah, and then there's Godzilla's Revenge, and it's like
yeah.
there is something really compelling about it because it's still trying to operate on, like, I think a good point of comparison is the Gamera series, which the Showa Gamera films, which I get to talk shit about Gamera, no one else. Okay. And, and I still love those movies, and I'm still like, there's a lot of really great stuff in them. But as an example, you have something like several of them, especially when you get into Gamera versus Virus and Gamera versus Guron. When the
Mm-hmm.
stock foot, we're not even getting a super monster. Like that's its own can of worms. But
Yeah.
but Virus and Guron, or Virus, however you pronounce it, you're so egregious with the stock footage, as really feels like they're just kind of killing time. They're just trying to pad the film.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas with Godzilla's Revenge, I feel like it's used a little more. It's just used creatively. Like it's used like of course this kid is a Godzilla fan. He's probably gonna has the scenes all memorized and he's gonna mash them together. Because I did the same thing with fan fiction and stuff when I was younger. I was like, well, I want to recreate this scene. I don't want to
Same.
like you're a kid. You don't really have the capacity yet to really get creative and really start making your own super elaborate Godzilla sequences. So something about it feels like you're watching a highlight reel,
Yeah.
and in the context of the film, it makes sense. So, but yeah.
So if you go into watching Godzilla's Revenge from the perspective of knowing that it's Ichiro's fan fiction,
Mm-hmm.
then it changes the perspective. I actually watched it back in March for the
Mm-hmm.
first time in like 8 years. It had been a long time since I watched Godzilla's Revenge, and I remember watching it. And I'm like, I've watched this film 3,000 times, and there are things that I'm noticing now as a, for the most part, mentally developed creature. And I'm like kind of wowed by it. I'm like, wow, I didn't see this before. I didn't piece these things together before. I would personally say that my underrated film is not Godzilla's Revenge, although I do think it is very much underrated for me personally. And I've been obsessed with this film for like 2 years, but Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, because it is a film
Mm.
that I hated on so much for so long, and then I rewatched it after a 5 year gap of not watching it, and I was just like, that was fun. I was like, that was fun. Like a black hole gun, like great. Like whoever thought
Yeah.
of that idea, like major props.
Megaguirus is one that I think it definitely has some issues. I personally take a lot of issue with the way Megaguirus is um articulated on film. I think that
Yeah.
they're like I feel, and there's moments when Megaguirus is like really cool and really a really cool monster, and then there's scenes where she's just kind of hanging there in the air. And I think I heard somewhere that they had intended to have her moving more in post with CG, like having her flapping her wings more, and
Mm-hmm.
they just ran out of time. Like she
Ah.
and it's As a result, it makes it kind of annoying and obnoxious because she's just hanging there, and it's like, guys, you made 3 Mothra movies. Like this not I know
And
you don't want
Mothra
to make.
had way more like movability,
Mhm.
articulation than Metagearus.
But there's a lot of good stuff in the movie. Like I kind of I have a soft spot for it now. And I will admit this is some bias, and I'll show this. I posted about this online, but I have Wakasa-san gave me this one of the last times I went to Japan. Um,
Oh,
my Mega Nulon prop, and I even wrote little like insect bio
like little
cards for it, little
descriptions.
descriptions for it. Although I'm upset now because I only recently found out that they actually do have scientific names written in the book in the movie. For Meganura and Meganulon, they have like little Latin names, but uh,
Uh,
but I named this one Wakasi after Wakasa. But apparently, these were made in collaboration with Bandai, and these were some of the
oh,
props they used. In the film. It might have been one of the ones that they had on Godzilla's back, for all I know.
that is so cool.
It's one of my favorite. It's like one of my favorite items I own. Um,
Mm,
but so I have a kind of a biased love of that movie now. Even though, yes, I agree, I was also a little bit. I kind of poo pooed it a little bit as well for a
hmm.
while.
The one thing that I absolutely love about the film is the human component, and which is because I mean, don't get me wrong, the battles are kind of nice, cool, especially the battle with Godzilla and the Swarm. Like that was really
Mhm.
cool. But I really like the human storyline. I love Kiriko's character. Like the very strange relationship she has with the nerdy dude bro. Throughout the film it's kind of like an interesting dynamic. Like
Hmm.
it's not difficult to think about. It's just kind of like fun, cheesy watching, and I think that's why I love it so much. But
It's
yeah,
kind of it kind of represented this this how do I put this? It kind of represents a perfect melding in certain, in for better or for worse, for like Showa kind of style Godzilla, a little bit of Heisei Godzilla, and kind of what they were going for with the Millennium.
yeah,
And so it has like these weird, it's kind of the everything Godzilla movie in a lot of ways, but I kind of want to go back and rewatch it now.
do it.
Mhm. But yeah, the only other thing I will say, one more thing, is as far as like underrated Godzilla movies go, because I do feel like minus one is while minus one is great, I feel like it's taken up a lot of the oxygen in the room as far as
Yeah.
Godzilla sequel talk goes. And I feel like, whenever people talk to me about Godzilla movies, I'm like, okay, well, here's the thing. If you want like a really good Godzilla sequel, like a want to see a Godzilla movie that definitely inspired minus one, watch GMK, because it's and I talked about it on Junk Food Cinema recently, and just my description of it, this whole idea of like Godzilla being powered by the everybody who died, who the Japanese army killed in the Pacific War and stuff. I remember,
Mm-hmm.
the host Brian was like, holy shit, that sounds amazing. And I'm like, it's it's such a goofy, irreverent film in a lot of ways, and yet it has this bone chilling undercurrent.
Yeah. I think that's why I love GMK so much, and it's also why I love the Kiro duology so much, is
Mm,
because like those respective films really ride the line between like science fiction and like spirituality in a very interesting way that we've really never seen.
I was gonna say I'm wearing my shirt.
Uh,
So.
Stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Sorry,
But
I
no,
didn't mean
like
to cut you off.
I think that those films, I mean, those films I feel like are pretty celebrated by a lot of Godzilla fans.
Yeah.
But I feel like we don't look at it from that one perspective, because I feel like that's what really sets, especially GMK and Tokyo SOS, out from all of the other Godzilla films. But speaking of really fun things that people should be checking out, let's talk about our comic, Matt. Let's do it. Let's
Let's
talk
talk about it.
about Godzilla in the Shadow of a God. That is the
Hmm.
title. That is the title of
Yes.
our comic. So you begin this chat because this was your child. Like you created this, so go for it.
Well, I appreciate that. So, like, I don't want to show off too much from the
Right.
interiors, but I did. So last year, I did the Space Godzilla one shot for Godzilla Rivals, with IDW, and that had been kind of a long and involved process, because I had gone through this whole thing where I didn't fall out with IDW or anything. We just kind of lost touch because the Godzilla license for them was in flux for a while,
Mm.
and then at a certain point, I guess they smoothed out whatever was going on, and then they started making comics again. So at that point, I thought, oh, I should reach back out. I should try to reach back out, because I think the editor I used to work with over there, Bobby Curnow, I don't think he was there anymore. I think he had moved on, but I got
Hmm.
through the grapevine some of the new editing team associated with it. And so I reached out and I was like, "Hey, here's who I am and here's my stuff." And they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Well, we see you've done stuff for us before." And admittedly, a lot of the new editing team, some of them were not familiar with my work, which is fine. If you're coming into a new job, you have to familiarize yourself with all the factors and stuff going in. And so I asked about, like, hey, can I pitch something? Can I pitch some stuff? Because I'm always looking to pitch Godzilla stuff. And I said, like, what about Rivals? Could I do a Rivals? And they were like, yeah, if you want to do, you pitch some stuff. And that was when I pitched Space Godzilla. And that went through. And it seemed like
Mhm.
it seemed like it did well. It seemed like it was well received. So then they asked me, the editing team there asked me, hey, well, do you want to do a short story for the 70th anniversary anthology? And I said, yeah, like it's only 10 pages. I can do that. And so I started kicking ideas around, and I was struggling a little bit because I'm like, what the hell do I do? Because
Mhm. I mean,
like
that's
there's
arguably big, a 70th anniversary story, right?
yeah, and I've already done so much Godzilla media that I just kind of didn't know what to do. Like I was a little stuck because I'm like, I've done so much. I've done so many comics, I've done so much material already. What can I do to celebrate the 70th in a way that's actually like, because I think that some of the other artists and writers who came in on the anthology, and there's a lot of really great stories in here. It's clear to me that a couple of them were like, they just wanted to do a Godzilla story because they either hadn't had a chance to do one before, or they just really like Godzilla. So they are unburdened by like this. They just want to do something cool and fun. And I'm like, hey, that's more power to you.
Mhm.
I I have brute forced a life around this friggin' franchise. So I needed to do something special. I'm not entirely sure where the genesis came from exactly, but I think it had to do with kicking some ideas around. And I was also like courting a couple of other people, thinking about like maybe, do I want to collaborate with someone, or do I want to write
Mhm.
something myself? And then um so like I said, I kicked a few ideas around with a couple other folks, and then this idea about 54, it's something that takes place kind of during 54, and it's very like just the single perspective that started getting really appealing to me. And then I remembered Steve Bissett's Godzilla comic from the 80s for Dark Horse. It was just I think it was just Godzilla King of the Monsters, and it's a one shot that they later spun off the Dark Horse Godzilla comic out of.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really like beautifully illustrated comic. It's all in black and white. um Steven is a master at conveying mood just with inks. And I thought like, well, now I don't really, should I not do it now because Steven did that one like back in the 80s? And I thought about it and I was like, well, he did it back in the 80s. Like, I'm sure I can do something that's kind of an homage.
Mhm.
And that carried through to the point of I actually, and I won't show it here, but I did a 2-page spread that wound up being a straight up send up of his 2-page spread from that comic.
Mhm.
And to the point where I actually got his blessing. Like I emailed him, I messaged him because we're friends on Facebook, and I messaged him and said, Mr. Bissett, are you okay with me? And just for context, I'm realizing I'm doing a lot of comic nerd talk.
I love it.
Steven Steven is best known for doing a legendary run on Alan Moore's Swamp Thing back in the I think it was the late 80s or the 90s.
Mhm.
He was like a lot of what we understand Swamp Thing to be nowadays. He and Alan Moore really established with that run in the comics.
Right.
So he's just this legendary artist. And I asked him, "Hey, do I have your blessing to do this spread this way?" And he was just like, "Absolutely. I'm really honored. It's so kind of you."
Aw.
And it was so sweet of him. And so I really made a couple of references to his work in that comic because what I wanted to do was kind of take the perspective of one character from that original comic and make it a story just based on like this perspective of, and again, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but this
Mhm.
one character
Right.
who is utterly powerless in this situation, like just trying to survive the night.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
so that really was the genesis of it. And so because I'm an artsy fartsy pain in the ass, I was trying to think of how can I do this? How can I convey this in a unique narrative way? Because like I'm fine with non-diegetic narration. which for
Mm-hmm.
those of you who don't know, I'm sure Donnie knows, but for
Mm-hmm.
those of you who don't know, um, diegesis means that it's within the story as opposed to
Yeah.
non-diegetic, where like if you have non-diegetic narration, that means that it's being told from like a God's eye view or like a,
Like a
and
third
then
person point of view. Yeah.
right, there's no in-story explanation as to who's telling the story. Whereas I'm a big fan of, well, how can we tell this story in a way that comes out of the story itself, that adds an extra layer to the story. So I did that with Space Godzilla, where I told all the narration through religious text, like a
Mm-hmm.
translated religious text. And with this one, the thought occurred at some point, oh, well, maybe it should be like from this character's perspective. And should it be like, well, how can I do that in a way that's not just her? Like, how can I just, again, artsy fartsy pain in the ass? How can I think of something that's a little different, just a little? And I thought, ooh, poetry. I don't know how to do poetry. So I don't know a damn thing about it. In fact, I think Caston might have suggested I reach out to somebody who knows poetry better than me.
Oh,
So,
Caston.
I really loved y'all's interview, by the way. I had a lot of fun. I was cackling like a lunatic for
I
halfway.
had a lot of fun with it too.
Yeah. But yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, I think she was the one who said, she has a better memory than me, but she was like, maybe you should reach out to Donnie, he's got this, he's a professional poet. And I'm like, yeah, I think he is. So I, so yeah, so
Uh,
that was when
and
you
then it
came.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then it happened.
Mm-hmm.
At, First and foremost, still Twitter pated over the fact that you had even asked me. Like when Matt sent me that message, like I literally stopped everything I was doing. I was like, full stop, what is happening? And then I was like, absolutely, I would love to write in a comic book, because that's, as a poet, like you're very much confined to like collections, individual poems, sometimes a musical project if you get lucky.
Mm.
Like combining together the comic book world and the poetry world is something that I don't think really has happened super often.
Mm.
So it was such a really fun and cool experience, and the fact that, and I'm trying to convey this without conveying spoilers as well, but the fact that the poetry is very much used as a tactic to create character development, I
Mhm.
think makes it pretty unique, and I'm hoping very engaging for the audience. So thank you for opening doors, Matt. I really
Aw.
appreciate that.
Well, I love doing it. I in this industry, in the entertainment industry as a whole, and especially, but it also in comics, it's sometimes hard to like just grab a friend and be like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't want to have to like get names, quote unquote, attached to stuff. I'd rather, I think I'm quoting Dan Harmon here a little bit, because he talked about this on like an episode of Game Grumps or something. He said, I write stuff and then I want to hire my friends to do it with me, because I know they'd be good for this job.
Yeah.
And I have been around long enough in this industry to learn that that does not always fly. I have pitched stuff where it's like, I have this friend, he has some experience in the industry, not a lot, but he's really, really good and he'd make a really good story. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand it, the editors and the money and the people handling the money and everything, they're like, well, we want this to sell. And part of the getting people on board is getting names attached. But
Yeah.
with short stories and anthologies and stuff, there's a little more wiggle room where you can just grab somebody and be like, hey, let's do this together. Like
And
we've
you
got a
can
shot.
experiment. Like you can
Yeah.
experiment. You can bring different art forms together in a very unique way.
Yeah. I really appreciated the way you because I sent you the script and
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated you were just just you took it and you just ran with it and just like
I
you
think what I love very much about that, I mean, you sent me the script, like and you gave me like kind of like the parameters and the specifications. It challenged me as a writer, which is
mm,
always something I'm looking to do.
mhm,
So the poems are written in Japanese tanka style. Ultimately, like our goal was to just really enmesh it into the visual narrative that's taking place in some
Mhm.
fashion, right? And I think that it really melded together, and I ultimately think that we worked very well together too, because we were like, okay, well, let's look at these different perspectives, like maybe this that didn't work, here's a couple of other options, type of
Mhm.
thing. So
Yeah, and it was also very advantageous the fact that it was this relatively short, like just it was just a 10-page story. It's just you wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and it's done. But and I think that that kind of gives you it gives you it's a lot less stressful than going through
yeah,
like an entire comic or something, which I think would be a fun something to keep for us to keep in mind down the road. I think that would be a lot of fun for
shine the bat signal and I'll be there. Sing
uh,
the Mothra song and I will rise.
I'll I'll have it on speed dial. I'll just have it like immediately pipe to your phone. The and I think having but it it makes it a lot less it's a lot less stressful, and it makes it so that okay, this is simple, it's direct, and it shows how, it means that there's not as so much back and forth that it becomes stressful,
Yeah.
you know. But
I think what made it less stressful though was the fact that you very much believed in my work from the beginning. Like that was so validating. Like just to have someone of your magnitude be like, "Donnie, I believe in your work and I want you to be a part of this with me." Like I may have cried a little bit, maybe a little
aw,
bit, a couple of times, but
uh,
worth a good cry though, a good cry. So,
it's so funny because I was Casson told me like, hey, you should reach out to Donnie, and if I'm remembering the events correctly, and then I'm like, yeah, I should do that, and I thought for a second, I'm like, I need to go read a bunch of his stuff. Hang on. And so, because I had read your stuff like a ways back before,
mhm,
and then I realized like I don't think I've read any of his recent stuff in a while. So I went
mhm.
and I just was like I knew you were good, and so but I just it's good to do your research, kids. Like
Absolutely, yeah.
and then I was like, okay, okay, yep, I think he gets it. I think he gets it. I mean, he obviously gets it. And yeah, so I think it came together really well. And it's interesting you mentioned the experimental aspect of it because I think there were quite a few other artists and writers who worked in this anthology who um haven't done Godzilla stuff before. And seeing it, I'm just like, man, I want to see these people do whole books. I want to see them
Mhm.
do whole stories because there's some really compelling stuff in here. There's also some stuff that's there's one at least one story in here where I'm just like, okay, I see that this person's politics align with ours. They're
Ah,
kind of, and I'm like,
oh,
yeah, get them. Um,
I love it.
and so yeah, I'm really excited for people to finally get their hands on it. I think it's a really solid I think it's really solid work, and I appreciated you just
Oh,
doing it and just knocking it
thank
out,
you.
I feel like I blinked and it was ready to go. Not to mention the fact that you didn't I don't think I had any art ready for it. I think you did the poetry before I even had the art finished. Was that how it worked?
You showed me like the very early art, but you were
Mhm.
also describing the panels for me as well. So
Mm,
like the descriptions kind of like helped me kind of tailor the poems to like those particular. The hardest part was once you did give me like the final version of the art,
mhm.
deciding like where should the poems go respectively.
Yeah.
And I had to like tinker around with it. Okay, like would it be fitting here? Would it be better here? And I tried to put in those descriptions of like this is where this should go. This is where,
Mhm.
and I think that at the end of the day, like it fell perfectly. So I was just like,
Yeah.
bam, here we go.
Yeah, I mean the lettering was by I do not want to get that
Yes, we
name
do not want
wrong.
to forget
The
this.
lettering was by Russ Wooton, which is a hell of a name. I love that. And the lettering, I think that they did a really good job of picking lettering that felt handwritten, felt like somebody's
Right.
diary, and they even got like a really cool and this is another thing that I wanted to bring up because I also made sure we were including calligraphy and hand drawn calligraphy by Maki Takarada.
Oh.
Yeah, the she was the daughter-in-law of Akira Takarada. And she and her husband Tetsuya, they still go to conventions, and they manage a lot of the guests that we get to meet at like G Fest and stuff. And they're just, and
Mm.
she's so sweet and she's so prompt. She was so she was so worried,
Mm.
about well, are we gonna have enough time? Like, are we gonna do I need to how much time should I have to lead in? And I had to tell her, like, Maki-san, you we, I think I told her, like, oh, we've got like a month, or oh, and she's like, is it okay though? Like, she's trying to be professional. She's trying to be she
She's
wants to
so
do it.
wholesome.
She's extremely wholesome. She also did that's this was totally unintentional. She did the calligraphy that's on my GMK shirt as well, that says giant monsters all out of the Daikaiju
Ah,
Sokugeki. Um and because she's when I found out that she did calligraphy professionally, I was like, yo, I have to tap into this resource. So and I think she did an amazing job. And she even did some kind of manga style sound effects for us, that I included here. I want to show this. I want to show this so bad, but I can't show it yet. You're gonna have to buy it.
everybody, you need to buy it because it's going to be worth it, and it's such a great story. If anything, I hope that audiences take away not only that it's a really cool story from a very unique perspective, but the fact that it's very unique worlds coming together to make something. Is there
Yeah.
any takeaway you hope the audience will take away now that we're wrapping this up?
I think that's a great question. I'm hoping that people like I'm just hoping that they see kind of the unique perspectives here, not just with our story, but with everybody's stories in here.
Yeah.
I hope everybody has a favorite. I hope that everybody kind of sees like a lot of the potential. It almost has a bit of a World War Z, like, original
Mm.
novel quality to it, where it's like all these different perspectives of like this one unified experience of being in the path of a monster attack, basically. um and I also like, maybe I'm speaking a little bit selfishly, but who cares. I'm
I love
hoping
it.
people like that I did the whole thing with markers and inks. Like, I did very little digital touching up on it. Mostly it was all with my Copics and my brush pens and stuff. And the editing staff at IDW liked it so much, they might want me to do more stuff like that in the future. So
Oh,
we'll see what happens. We will see what
oh,
happens.
I am manifesting that that happens. Honestly, one last thing that I'm going to add, and then we will wrap things up here. It was so cool to be able to watch your work transform, because like throughout the whole process, like Matt was sending me like every version of the art as it was like getting more and more detailed, and it was really cool to see like just the level of you know rigor that goes into putting all of that together. It was bird's eye view. It was great.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really had a lot of fun with it. And I just appreciated you being so supportive, and being professional, and just being good at what you do. So I'm just so happy that I could facilitate, you being able to, you've been a Godzilla, you like me, you're a Godzilla fan, you've been a Godzilla fan your whole life. And so it's great when I can grab other fans and get them involved in the process.
Yeah,
Which I've only, yeah.
if I could go back in time, if I could go back in time
Hmm.
and tell fanfiction kid me on DeviantArt that I will end up writing and participating in like a comic in some way, again, he would grab his pants.
In a fun way.
In a fun way, in a fun way.
Little Donny rainbow poops. I don't know why it's the first thing that came
The
to my
only kind of poops that I have, honestly. Oh.
Oh, I love it.
Anyway, Matt, where can people find your stuff?
You guys can find me over at mattfrankart.net and patreon.com/mattfrankart. I have a Big Cartel store now, which is mattfrankart.bigcartel.com, where once the comic is out, I will be putting up originals. Please buy them. um, yeah, I'm just, I'm around. You just Google Matt Frank and Godzilla, you'll find me. Also, this weekend, the weekend, because we're recording this like 2 days before the book actually comes out.
Mhm.
And this weekend, the weekend of May 17th and 18th, I will be at Heroes and Fantasies in San Antonio, Texas, which is my hometown. I'll be signing copies of the Godzilla 70th anniversary. I will have a new print as well at the event. I think people will really like it. If I have any left over, I'll put them up on the store after the event. But yeah, really excited for that, and I think I think we're gonna have a good time.
Well, Matt, thank you as always for taking time out of your schedule to nerd out with me. I know we needed to get together to nerd out about our comic. And again, thank you for opening doors. Thank you for being such a fierce advocate for everyone else in the community. It really means a lot. And not only are you doing that, you're also navigating like a phenomenal artist career that is just very inspiring to many. So keep it up, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, don't forget, Growing Up with Godzilla premieres on the first and third Sunday of every month, if I have my crap together, and at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, do not forget to keep standing tall, okay, my friends? Have a good rest of your day. Bye.